The late afternoon sun hung low in the sky, casting long golden streaks across the cracked pavement of Maplewood Avenue. The heat clung to the air, thick and heavy, turning every breath into labor. Eleanor Hughes stepped carefully onto her front porch, gripping the chipped wooden railing as she descended the steps, her knees groaning with the dull, persistent ache of arthritis. It was a pain she had come to accept as part of her days now. The doctors had told her there was nothing to be done, only to manage it. She adjusted the wide-brimmed straw hat shielding her from the sun and paused, glancing up at the towering high-rises that loomed in the distance where modest homes had once stood. The neighborhood wasn't what it used to be. The families she had known for decades were long gone, replaced by younger, wealthier newcomers who walked these streets with easy entitlement. They barely noticed Eleanor as she made her way down the sidewalk. She had become invisible. But Eleanor had lived in this neighborhood for nearly 50 years. She had raised a son here, buried a husband here. She had taught in the local elementary school and attended Sunday service at St. Luke's down the block. And yet, on days like today, it felt like none of it mattered. The world had moved on without her. Today, however, was simple, an errand. Milk and bread from Cooper's Market. She reached into the pocket of her light cotton dress and checked the neatly folded $10 bill. That was all she needed. Her son, Nathaniel Hughes, always came to mind on days like this. Nathaniel wasn't the little boy who used to burst through the door after school anymore, eager to tell her about his day. He wasn't the teenage debater who'd spent hours at their kitchen table preparing arguments with fierce determination. He was a man now, a powerful man, the United States Attorney General, the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the country, the defender of justice. And yet, even as she thought of his success, Eleanor sometimes wondered if he remembered what it felt like to be powerless. He called when he could, sent flowers on Mother's Day and expensive scarves on Christmas. Always respectful, always loving, but always busy. Too busy for long talks or visits. Too busy to notice the loneliness that crept into her evenings. But not today. Today was just an errand. The heat pressed against her as she moved slowly down the sidewalk. She clutched her small purse tighter, not from fear but habit. These streets were different now. Sleek storefronts, minimalist cafes with glass walls, and outdoor seating shaded by trendy umbrellas had replaced the old diners and hardware stores. Young professionals sipped overpriced espressos as they tapped away on sleek laptops, rarely glancing up. Eleanor might as well have been part of the scenery. She sighed, brushing away the thought. Today wasn't for regrets. She had taught Nathaniel long ago how to carry himself in the world, how to avoid suspicion, how to make himself small when necessary, but large when required. She knew the rules, too. Don't linger. Keep your hands visible. Move with purpose, but not urgency. The bell over Cooper's Market chimed softly as she stepped inside, and a blast of cool air wrapped around her, momentarily relieving her of the oppressive heat. She stood straighter, adjusting her hat. Just in and out, she reminded herself. She made her way to the dairy aisle first. Milk, then bread. Simple. The store hummed quietly. The muted whir of refrigeration units, the distant beep of the register, and the soft murmur of conversation created a peaceful rhythm. Eleanor's fingers trailed along the cold glass door of the dairy case before she reached for a half-gallon of milk, enjoying the refreshing chill against her skin. Then she noticed movement from the corner of her eye. A young man, maybe early 20s, hood up, head down, moving fast. Eleanor instinctively watched him. His hands darted across shelves, pocketing snack bars with practiced ease. He pivoted sharply toward the exit. Beep, beep. The alarm blared, slicing through the quiet store like a siren. Eleanor turned just as the young man shoved his way out the door, disappearing into the street. The store was silent for half a heartbeat. Then you. Stop right there. The voice was sharp, commanding. Eleanor flinched, turning toward it. A man in a navy polo strode toward her, his badge gleaming on his belt. An off-duty officer, it seemed. His eyes locked onto hers with cold precision. You, he repeated, voice low but unyielding. Hand where I can see them. Eleanor's heart thudded in her chest. I don't understand, she managed. He closed the distance between them in 3 quick strides. Before she could react, his hand clamped around her wrist. Don't play dumb. Empty your pockets. I haven't even paid yet, she said, confused and frightened, holding up her shopping basket. The alarm went off. You were right here. Panic surged through her. She turned toward the counter. Thomas, she called. Thomas Carter, the owner of Cooper's, stood behind the register. Tell him you saw. I didn't take anything. Thomas met her gaze for a split second, hesitation flickering across his face. And then he looked away. I didn't see, he said quietly. Eleanor's stomach dropped. Please, she whispered. But the officer was already twisting her around. Cold steel snapped shut around her wrists. The handcuffs bit into her skin as she gasped. The store tilted. She nearly buckled under the weight of it. The humiliation, the betrayal, the disbelief. The ride to the station was silent. The city lights blurred past the window as Eleanor stared, unseeing. She felt smaller with each passing block. The fluorescent lights of the police station glared harshly as they led her inside. Officers barely glanced at her. She was fingerprinted, photographed, and processed like any common criminal. Shoplifting, they said. No need to check the cameras, they insisted. She sat in the holding cell, hands resting limply in her lap, listening to the low hum of the building. A young woman sat across from her, thin arms wrapped around herself. They got you too? The woman asked after a long silence. Eleanor nodded faintly. Seems that way. What for? Milk and bread, Eleanor murmured. The woman scoffed bitterly. Granola bar, she said. For my daughter. Their eyes met, both weary, both heavy with knowing. The system didn't care. It never had. When they finally called her for her phone call, Eleanor hesitated. She didn't want to burden Nathaniel. But as she sat in that cell, realizing no one would speak for her, she dialed the number. Mama. His voice was alert, worried. Nathaniel, she whispered. Baby, I need you. The courtroom was cold and sterile. Eleanor sat at the defendant's table, wrists aching from the tight plastic ties. Judge Raymond Bishop presided, his gaze distant and disinterested. The prosecutor spoke smoothly about proximity and circumstantial evidence. Her defense attorney barely raised an objection, until the courtroom doors swung open. Nathaniel Hughes entered, his presence filling the room with tension. He moved with quiet authority, his tailored suit immaculate, his gaze razor-sharp. I want to see the footage, he said. The prosecutor stammered. There's no footage. The cameras malfunctioned. Nathaniel's stare hardened. I want to see it. The truth surfaced. There's footage. They had lied. The video played. It showed Eleanor shopping quietly, unaware, while the real thief slipped past. It showed her surprise when the officer grabbed her. Judge Bishop dismissed the case immediately. Eleanor stood slowly, the room spinning slightly. She met the judge's gaze. If my son weren't who he is, she said quietly, would justice have stood by me today? Silence. Outside, reporters swarmed. Nathaniel shielded her, guiding her away. Later, at home, Eleanor sat by her window. She had believed in fairness. She had believed in justice. But it wasn't truth that freed her. It was power. Her phone rang. Nathaniel's voice was steady. Y promise, mama. I won't let this happen to anyone else. For the first time in a long time, hope stirred in her heart. What do you think of Eleanor's story? Did it make you reflect on justice and who it truly serves? If this story moved you, help us share the message. Hit like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss another powerful story. Your support keeps these stories alive and the conversation going. Thank you for being part of this journey. See you in the next one.